Hey everyone, if you're like us, you want to stay informed, really get what's going on, but without drowning in endless feeds. That's what we try to do here.
Exactly. And today, we're diving deep into something super critical: misinformation. How it spreads, especially when things get politically messy.
Yeah, and we're using the recent situation in Bangladesh as our main case study.
We've got some really interesting sources lined up. There's a GNet report, that's the Global Network on Extremism and Technology, looking at online Hindutva groups.
Okay.
Then some on-the-ground perspectives from the Daily Star and MRDI in Bangladesh.
Right.
And finally, a report from CNA about, well, how we can all get better at spotting this stuff, building resilience.
So the mission today, let's try and understand how these misinformation campaigns actually work, the mechanics of it, and maybe more importantly, figure out how we can avoid getting fooled.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, Bangladesh. Let's start there. August 2024, big changes. Sheikh Hasina steps down, Nobel winner Muhammad Yunus heads up an interim government. That must have created, well, some chaos.
Oh, absolutely. Huge uncertainty. And that kind of political shift, it creates an information vacuum, a gap where the usual reliable news sources might be disrupted.
And that's where others jump in.
Precisely. The GNet report really digs into this. It found that certain online Hindutva groups were very active on Twitter right during this period.
Okay, so what were they aiming for? Just reporting the facts? I doubt it.
No, not at all. The report shows they were actively trying to frame the political unrest, which was complex, as purely communal attacks against Hindus.
Ah, so twisting the narrative.
Exactly. The goal, it seems, was to stir up sectarian tension, build this story of Hindus being under siege.
How did they actually, do that? What were the tactics?
A whole range, really. They were fabricating pretty sensational claims, just making things up to get attention, provoke emotion.
Like clickbait, but worse.
Kind of, yeah. And doctoring images, manipulating photos to fit the story they wanted to tell. Plus, maybe the worst part, digging up old videos from totally unrelated incidents.
No way.
And passing them off as current attacks on Hindus in Bangladesh.
That's incredibly dishonest. Does the GNet report give concrete examples?
It does. One big one was these completely unverified claims that spread like wildfire on social media, alleging 500 attacks on Hindus across 52 districts.
500, that's huge. And unverified.
Totally unverified. Some Indian news channels even picked it up. Then there was the way they spun attacks on Awami League leaders.
Yeah.
Now, some of those leaders were Hindus, some were Muslim.
Right.
But the narrative pushed online was that only Hindus were being targeted. It ignored the political dimension entirely.
So just cherry picking and distorting. And I heard the term Hindu genocide was even used. That ramps things up considerably.
It absolutely does. That narrative was pushed hard, and they used specific hashtags to amplify it all. Things like hashtag Hindus are not soft in Bangladesh, hashtag save Hindus in Bangladesh, hashtag Hindus under attack.
Makes it easy to find and share, I guess.
And that hashtag allies in Bangladeshi Hindus one, echoing other campaigns. It's about getting eyeballs, coordinating the spread.
The report also mentioned a Bangladeshi Hindu toolkit. A toolkit? That sounds really planned out.
It really does. A Bangladeshi academic apparently uncovered it. It was basically a step-by-step guide for the online campaigns, even for organizing protests in places like the US, UK, Canada.
What did it tell people to do?
It gave instructions on how to craft the message, pushing that Hindu genocide angle. It even suggested using exaggerated numbers on placards and posts, and told people to reach out to media, contact politicians in the West, really trying to shape international opinion.
Wow, a coordinated influence campaign.
Hmm.
And then there was that leaked WhatsApp message, something about the Awami League's student wing. That sounds complicated.
Yeah, that adds another layer, a really disturbing one. A message supposedly from the Bangladesh Chhatra League, that's the AL's student wing, allegedly talked about plans to stage attacks on Hindu temples themselves.
Wait, stage attacks, like false flag operations.
Exactly. Make it look like someone else did it, presumably to blame opponents or escalate the situation. The message apparently suggested this was to reinforce the Hindutva propaganda, maybe create chaos to help Hasina return.
That's incredibly cynical, blaming others for things you orchestrated yourself.
It even mentioned people posing as fake victims in protests to amplify the whole thing. It's pretty shocking stuff, if true.
I imagine fact-checkers had a field day with all this.
They were certainly busy, thankfully, yes. Fact-checkers in Bangladesh and internationally worked hard to debunk a lot of it. Like there was this video of a house burning,
Yeah.
claimed to be the Hindu cricketer Liton Das's house. Big name, gets attention. Turns out It was actually the house of Mashraf Mortaza, a Muslim cricketer and AL lawmaker.
Completely false. Just using a famous name. Any other big ones they debunked?
Oh, yeah. There were claims of a huge mass exodus of Hindus fleeing Bangladesh. That led to calls for India to intervene militarily, all based on nothing. And another video supposedly showing an attack on the Navagraha Hindu temple, was it really? Footage of a police station on fire. And that one even got broadcast on Republic TV in India.
That's alarming, a TV station running it. Shows how easily this stuff can slip through, even into mainstream channels. Did the GNet report say where most of this was coming from?
It did. They used geolocation data from Brandwatch, and it pointed pretty strongly towards India. Most of the accounts pushing the disinformation seem to be based there.
So originating outside Bangladesh, largely.
It looked that way,
Okay.
which makes it a transnational issue, much harder to tackle just within Bangladesh.
And it's crucial to remember, like the GNet report stresses, that while Hindus have faced violence historically in Bangladesh, 1971 is a stark example, this recent campaign seemed very much about exploiting those old wounds for current political games.
Right. It conveniently ignored the context of Hasina's own 15-year rule, which had its own problems, and the student movement that led to her leaving.
It wasn't just spontaneous post-Hasina chaos.
Exactly. The motive, according to the analysis for these Hindutva groups, seems tied to seeing Hasina's departure as a strategic loss for India, basically. She was seen as an ally, someone who looked out for Hindu interests.
So whip up fear about Islamists taking over and targeting Hindus.
To imply that, well, maybe Bangladesh still needs Hasina, or at least someone India prefers. It's fear-mongering with a political goal.
What were the real-world impacts? Did this stay online?
Unfortunately, no, it never does it? Within Bangladesh, it definitely increased fear among Hindus, created real anxiety and uncertainty, and it made things much harder for UNIS's interim government trying to stabilize things.
And outside Bangladesh?
The impact spilled into India, too. A right-wing group there, the Hindu Raksha Dal, actually attacked Muslim workers in Ghaziabad.
Why?
They falsely accused them of being Bangladeshis who were targeting Hindus back home, based on the misinformation. It's a terrifying example of online lies leading to real-world violence.
That's horrific. Direct physical attacks fueled by online rumors.
Chilling, isn't it? Shows the direct line from digital falsehoods to offline harm.
And the GNet report mentioned Tommy Robinson in the UK getting involved too.
Yeah, the far-right figure. He shared the misinformation, claimed a Hindu genocide was happening. He connected it to his usual anti-Islam narrative and even linked it back to things like the unrest in Leicester in 2022, where similar online rumor-mongering played a role.
So it hooks into these existing international networks of hate and misinformation.
Exactly. These narratives travel, they get adapted, they find audiences ready to believe them.
Okay, so that's the grim picture of how it worked. But let's talk solutions. The MRDI article mentioned fact-checking starting up in Bangladesh. That feels like a positive step.
It definitely is. Fact-checking as a dedicated thing is fairly new there. BD Fact Check is a key example, started back in 2017.
What prompted them?
Kaderuddin Shashir and Zahid Arman founded it, partly motivated by all the fake news around the 2016 U.S. election, actually. They saw the need.
Interesting. So how do they operate? Who are they trying to reach?
Well, they publish checks on their site, use social media heavily. Facebook is huge in Bangladesh, so that's key. They tackle all sorts, but focus a lot on political and health misinformation.
Has it made a difference?
It seems so. The article suggests their work has encouraged some mainstream media outlets to improve their own fact-checking, which is great. And they've built a following, especially among young people, like during student protests.
That's good, reaching the youth. But are there challenges?
For sure. The article notes it's harder to reach older people or more religiously conservative groups. They might be less likely to question stuff they see online or seek out fact checks. Plus, more groups are getting into fact-checking now, so it's a competitive space.
Right. Now, the Daily Star took a broader look, didn't it, at what all this means for democracy in Bangladesh.
Yes, they argue pretty strongly that this isn't just about people being misled on specific facts. It's a fundamental threat to democracy itself.
Why so?
Because it warps people's whole perception of reality. It makes informed decision-making, holding leaders accountable, really difficult. And of course, there's the risk of violence, like we discussed, from rumors about minorities or political enemies.
So the goal is maybe bigger than just swaying opinion on one issue.
The argument is that it's often about undermining the whole democratic process, eroding trust in institutions, making people cynical. It weakens the foundations.
And that specific Daily Star article, Politics of Indian Propaganda, That sounds like it points fingers more directly.
It does. It really focuses on the disinformation coming from some Indian media after Hasina left. It gives examples we touched on: attacks on AL leaders, spun as anti-Hindu attacks, arson at AL offices called temple burnings, old pictures used as new evidence.
Do they quantify this?
Yeah, they cited an investigation by Rumor Scanner, another Bangladeshi fact-checker, found 49 Indian media outlets spreading at least 13 false stories between August and December 2024. Republic Bangla was named as a major player.
Wow, 49 outlets. That's significant. What kind of stuff were they spreading?
All sorts. Fake letters, misidentifying people in videos or photos, false health updates about figures, baseless claims about militant groups popping up, just general misrepresentation of events. A real mix.
And the article brought up history, right? Attacks on minorities happened under Hasina, too.
Exactly. It uses data from Ain-o-Salish Kendra, a human rights group, showing attacks on minorities happened throughout Hasina's time in power, too. Numbers went up and down.
So why is that important?
Because it suggests this sudden, intense focus from Hindutva groups after she left wasn't just about concern for Hindus, but maybe more politically motivated, an attempt to create communal tension when it suited them, perhaps.
So the argument in that piece is basically that elements in India's ruling class were maybe unhappy with the change in Bangladesh and use this as leverage.
That's the core argument, yes. That they're trying to portray themselves as protectors of Hindus abroad, perhaps struggling with losing influence in Dhaka. The article contrasts this with the situation of minorities inside India itself.
Right. And what's the takeaway then, according to the author?
That Bangladesh needs to fight the misinformation hard, hold anyone committing violence accountable no matter the politics, and crucially, try to connect with secular democratic voices in India who also oppose this kind of communal politics.
Okay, so the Bangladesh case really lays bare the anatomy of a campaign and its nasty consequences.
Right.
Let's shift gears now to solutions. That CNA report focusing on prevention, right?
Yeah, the CNA report talks about prophylactic measures. Things you do before the disinformation really takes hold. They use this great analogy: disinformation spreading like a virus.
A virus. How so?
Well, think about exponential spread. One person tells two, they each tell two more, it explodes. Their point, shown in a figure in the report, is that if you can just reduce the number of people who share the bad info, even by a little bit early on, it dramatically cuts down the overall spread.
Makes sense. Stop it early. So what are the main preventative tools they suggest?
Two key evidence-based ones: inoculation and media literacy.
Okay, inoculation. Like a vaccine. How does that work for information?
Pretty much the same idea. It's about pre-exposing people to weakened doses of persuasion tactics or misinformation narratives, so they build up resistance, mental antibodies, if you will.
Interesting. How do you inoculate someone mentally?
The report mentions two main ways. One is issue-focused, so you warn people about specific types of lies they might hear about a certain topic, like before a hurricane, telling people, you might hear false rumors that shelters require citizenship papers. That's not true.
Okay, preemptive debunking.
Right. But the report notes this can get tricky, controversial even. You're essentially telling people this is true, that is false, which can be hard in heated political moments.
Yeah, I can see that. What's the other way?
Technique-based inoculation. This is less about the topic and more about the tricks used to mislead people.
Tricks. Like what?
Things like ad hominem attacks, attacking the person, not the argument. Using really loaded emotional language, presenting false choices like, you're either with us or against us. Scapegoating. Using arguments that just don't make sense. Incoherence.
Ah, so teaching people to spot the manipulation playbook.
Exactly. Table 1 in the report lists these out. This way is generally less controversial because you're not judging the content itself, just teaching people to recognize how they might be being manipulated. You see these tactics all the time online, right? They're designed to get past your rational brain.
Definitely. Does this inoculation actually work? And can you do it on a big scale?
Research suggests it works best before the bad information is everywhere and people have already made up their minds. And yes, it seems scalable. The CNA report mentions a cool Google study with Cambridge and Bristol universities.
What did they do?
They ran short videos like YouTube ads teaching people to spot these manipulation techniques. And they found about a 5% improvement in people's ability to recognize them even a day later.
5%. Doesn't sound huge.
Maybe not individually, but think about that virus analogy. If 5% fewer people share the bad stuff early on, it makes a big difference overall. And those videos reach millions. So technique-based stuff scales well. But like a real vaccine, the effect might fade, so you might need boosters.
Okay, interesting. So that's inoculation. What about the second thing, media literacy? How's that different?
Media literacy is, well, it's broader. It's the overall ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create media in various forms. It's not just spotting manipulation, like inoculation often focuses on.
So it's more foundational skills.
Yeah, it includes understanding how media messages are constructed, who's creating them, what their purpose might be, how to check sources, how to research effectively. It's about critical thinking across the board when it comes to information. Studies show it helps people trust good media more, spot fake headlines better, and generally believe misinformation less.
How do you teach media literacy? Are there programs?
The report mentions two main types of training. First, in-person programs, like workshops, classroom stuff. They highlight IREX's Learn to Discern program, L2D.
Learn to discern. What does that involve?
It has modules on understanding media, recognizing misinformation and manipulation, and then fighting back against it. A study in Ukraine found people who took the L2D training were 13% better at spotting fake news 16 months later. That's quite a lasting effect.
13% is pretty significant. What's the other type of training?
Remote messages. Think social media campaigns, short videos, online tip sheets, like Facebook's 10 tips for spotting fake news, or the World Health Organization's campaign during COVID.
Ah, like those WHO graphics.
Exactly. Figure 3 in the report shows top tips for navigating the infodemic. Things like check the source, go beyond the headline, check the date, look for evidence, check your own biases, use fact checkers.
Simple, clear advice.
Right. And the big advantage there is scalability. You can push those tips out to millions easily and quickly online.
So different approaches,
Yeah.
inoculation more focused, media literacy broader. Now, why is this especially important for emergency management? The CNA report linked it there.
Oh, it's critical. Disinformation during a disaster can be incredibly dangerous. It undermines the whole response effort.
How?
The report gives the example of Hurricane Helene. So much fake news was flying around that FEMA had to set up a whole webpage just to debunk rumors. Worse, false stories about what FEMA was doing led to armed militia groups showing up.
Armed militias.
Seriously, which then led to some federal responders being pulled out because it wasn't safe. Imagine that help being withdrawn because of lies spreading online. It drains resources, causes delays, puts lives at risk.
So emergency managers need to plan for this specifically. It's not just about the storm or the fire. It's about the information environment, too.
Absolutely. The CNA report says they need to anticipate disinformation, expect it, and plan how to fight it. Think ahead about the likely rumors, like those citizenship checks at shelters, for example.
So get ahead of it.
Yes, use preemptive messaging. Tell people about common myths before they spread. Provide clear, accurate info constantly. Offer workshops or online resources on spotting fake news, checking sources.
And use social media themselves.
Definitely. Use it to push out reliable updates, share tips on critical consumption, and actively debunk false claims as soon as they pop up. It has to be part of the emergency plan now.
It really feels like a multi-pronged approach is needed. Educate people beforehand, communicate clearly during, and debunk rapidly.
That's the bottom line. Building resilience means empowering individuals and having systems ready to counter the lies, especially when stakes are high, like in a crisis.
This has been incredibly insightful. So just to wrap up, we've seen misinformation isn't random. It's often planned, targeted, and can cause real harm. The Bangladesh situation is a stark reminder.
But, and this is the crucial part, we're not helpless. Strategies like inoculation, teaching people to spot manipulation tactics, and broader media literacy training can really make a difference. They give us the tools.
And for everyone listening who wants to stay informed, understanding these dynamics, how narratives are shaped, how information is weaponized, it's just essential today, isn't it?
Couldn't agree more. We're swimming in information, and learning how to swim safely, how to be critical, is a vital skill now.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Start noticing these things. How might these techniques, the emotional appeals, the scapegoating, the dodgy sourcing, be playing out in the information you see every day? Not just in big international crises, but maybe closer to home. And what part can each of us play just by pausing before we share something?
Yeah, thinking critically about what we consume, and especially what we amplify. That's something we can all do.